So, you're wanting to be a tantric lover. Good for you. It's definitely something that will change your life and improve your love life and your sex life. So, it's kind of the direction that things are going on the planet where more and more people are wanting to learn the techniques and the philosophy. And I'm thrilled that I get to be the one to pass on that information to you. I am Sheea Shafer, a Tantrika and Dakini, highly trained in the arts of Tantra, as well as a love coach and relationship coach. So we're just going to cover some basic things about Tantra so you have an understanding of what it is, because it seems to confuse a lot of people. And there's lots of different ways that you can define it. So Tantra is kind of like Zen in the sense that it's a way of life. It is something that mostly I've studied the Taoist versions and the versions from India, as well as the Native American version called Kwadoshka. And it's a way of life that involves being very present, not being result-oriented, but enjoying each moment for whatever shows up and being present to that. So it's quite opposite of American culture, I would say, especially if you compare it to porn. And so I'm going to be talking to men sometimes more directly and women more times directly at certain points in this training. And it's important to learn both sides because your partner, you'll be able to understand him or her better. So for me, I've been trained through several different Tantra schools and practicing, and it's going on 8 years now. So I started in Maui, and now I'm in California and presently in San Diego. So for me, I would say it kind of, Tantra is a way to get back to our roots of what sexuality was meant to be in its sacredness. And it puts back sort of the feminine essence back into sexuality as well, which has been lost over time. And of course, these, Tantra is very old. It's been around a long time. And, like the Kama Sutra is part of Tantra, for instance. But a lot of it has gotten suppressed because of things like the medieval times and, different governments or religions suppressing sexuality in general. And, it was basically a way for leaders to kind of hide the information because it is very empowering to know it and practice it, and they didn't really want the masses empowered. So they kind of even villainized it a bit. And so, it's having a comeback because it's effective and it works, and it makes for a much more holistic approach to sexuality, and hopefully one day it'll just be common knowledge because, especially in America, I think the Puritanist background that we have is quite dysfunctional. And unfortunately, a lot of people learn about sex through porn, and that's not a very conscious source to learn about sex. It can be very misleading because they're only filming the highlights of what actually happens, and they're not filming the process because they would lose their audience, So they're mostly filming the climaxes and the high points and kind of more the sensationalism aspects of sexuality, and it doesn't always cover anything to do with intimacy or what women really want and respond to. It's kind of more male-oriented in how and what it films, and it's just not a very conscious version that's very honoring of women, that's for sure. And honestly, it's not very honoring of men either. In this, for instance, most porn stars are very well endowed, and I think that tends to make a lot of men feel uncomfortable, like, oh, am I not big enough, or am I not long enough? And, I don't think that's serving us because there's all different sizes. And we'll cover that later in another video that's more advanced, because the Kwadoshka Native American system covers the different anatomy types of men and women, and there's all different sizes and depth and length and width and preferences and all those kinds of things. And it's very fascinating. And that way, you know, everyone is represented, and you can pick, you know, which one you are and learn about yourself. So, you know, the sacredness is brought back in, the spirituality of sex is brought back in through Tantra, and, you know, femininity as well. So, you know, sex can be a very deep, spiritual, conscious experience. I mean, that's how it was created to be. But, you know, a lot of times it just gets, what would the word for that be? Bastardized or something. You know, to be something that's just sensationalist, I guess is one way to say it. And, you know, we're able to manifest actual things that we want in our lives through how we do our sexuality. And that was one of the, you know, that's one of the big, powerful things about sexuality, is if you apply an intention to your orgasm, it can count for something. Like, I'd like to have more intimacy in my life, or I'd like to have better communication skills, or more prosperity, or better health, you know, whatever's important to you that day. And you have your orgasm count for that. And so instead of like just praying it by saying it, your whole body is saying it. And it's like you're shooting that intention out to the universe, saying, help me manifest this. And so, you know, they didn't want the masses empowered in that way, because it is very effective and it works. And I do it every time. So that's kind of an example of where spirituality can come in. And then, you know, I think there's also a lot of misunderstanding between the sexes in a lot of ways. And I know that at least in America, there's been a lack of conscious communication between couples and just in general. So that's something that's changing. There's more of a movement towards higher transparency and honesty and vulnerability, and learning, you know, the actual techniques of conscious communication, like using I statements instead of you statements, blaming kind of thing. It gets rid of, conscious communication gets rid of things like blaming and shaming and making wrong the other person. And instead you just use I statements so that you can just own how you feel and what you need and what you want, and make requests, which is much easier to hear than someone who's attacking you and making you wrong. So it's really important to recognize that, you know, without conscious communication, it's really hard for a couple to get to the other side of their